There are a few cars in our industry that invoke such a strong allergic reaction with some people, like the X6 does. Purists are simply rubbed the wrong way because they see it as an SUV that's compromised with less space, and when it tries to then be a performance car, the story gets worse and the comments become even worse as well. But that never deterred Munich from really taking the car seriously. In fact, the first ever M cars with xDrive were the X6M and the X5M of the E70 and E71 series. But you look at the state of our super and hyper SUVs today, all of them have copied the formula first laid out by the X6M originally, in that it's a more svelte looking SUV that is trying to be like a super or a hyper saloon. And that's led all the way into companies even like Maranello. Now, cars like the Purosangue use much more advanced body control suspension technologies like spool valve damping, or we've got air suspension with semi-active dampers or rear wheel steering, etc, etc. Our X6M and our X5M duo don't use any of that. If anything, they are much more like the previous M5 in terms of their basis under the skin, used within a traditional SUV or SUV coupe body. And that sets them apart as perhaps being a little more traditional and pure than these newer super SUVs that we have today. So today the question is, what are the LCI changes compared to when we drove the pre-facelift, and how does that M5 formula translate into an SUV like this when it comes to fast driving, and importantly when it comes to more comfortable driving as well. So let's check out today this new LCI of the X6M. So guys, instead of remove before race, today's sponsor is something that you definitely want to add before you race, and that is RaceChip with their in-house developed, made in Germany, tuning boxes to push your BMW M car further than it's ever gone before. Now here is their top dog version, which is the GTS Black, and let's take our X6M competition as an example. And when you install this box, you'll get an additional 82 brake horsepower and 167 Newton meters of torque, which is an increase of 30%, which is damn good. Why am I holding my phone? Because it's not a one-trick pony. You can use their app in here to change the map with 7 different fine-tuned mappings on the go. And it's so easy to do. You've even got the driving modes that you can select in here, and I can't think of anyone else who gives you that kind of configurability while you're on the go. Personally, I've always been paranoid about tuning cars, so it's great to know that this is built in-house with high-quality materials. And another cherry on top is that in some countries you even get a year's warranty on your engine, which is just brilliant. Now it may be that you're just starting off with tuning and you don't want to go the whole hog with the GTS. They also do another box, which is called the RS box, and with this you get 20% increase in power and still all the great benefits of the plug and play and the fine-tuning, etc. Speaking of the plug-and-play element, it's easy to install. Even an idiot like me can do it. All it needs to do is be plugged in and installed. But if you don't even want to do that, they have a vast network of approved dealers who can help do it for you, which is great. So either you can go for the amazing GTS Black to get the full power upgrade, or of course you have the option of the entry-level RS. Now of course, I've got a great discount for you guys who want to jump into this, and I'm getting you 15% off. Just use the code RBR15 and you will get a straight 15% off. Huge thanks to RaceChip for sponsoring today's episode, and to you guys for always supporting our regular sponsors. Let's get back to the car. So guys, our X6M has been updated. This is a facelift, the LCI. We've covered this on RBR before in a perhaps less in your face spec. This is really out there in Toronto red, but I'm glad we have it because it kind of shows you just how wild you can go with the LCI. And the LCI has had such a aggressive facelift, I think, compared to the previous one. BMW now increasing the size of their grills, or sometimes decreasing, as we've seen with newer concepts. But I think this looks really good, and I think it suits the look of the X6. I think it's only made it better. We've got those new slimmer lights that share their design with the new M4. So I like the slimmer lights. You've got the much bigger grille, which has then got this gloss black element that links into the lower part, your new air intakes. Compared to the X5M, you get an additional spoiler lip at the bottom and one at the back as well. And all of that helps kind of reduce the bulk and make this car look that much more interesting. You still got your staggered wheel setup, which looks great on X6M. One thing that does rub me the wrong way a little bit though is how high the car sits on its wheels. I just think it's at least an inch or two too high. It almost looked like It's air sprung and it's on the wrong setting. I've always liked SUV coupes personally. My buying history kind of reflects that as well, with my love of GLCs and GLEs, etc. And if it was for me versus X5, I would always go for the X6. I just personally think it looks better, and the market is with me. Hate me if you will, but these cars sell amazingly well. So a really nice visual update outside, but there's also big changes inside where it's basically taken the best of the M2 and the M3, and it's actually really worth noting the changes inside the M versions because they're significantly enough different to the standard X5 that we recently reviewed as well. So I'm going to show you that later. Now let's talk about these LCIs. Like all the other X5 and X6 LCIs, these are now the first ever BMW M mild hybrid cars. What does that entail? You probably know this already, but I'm going to give you a little lesson. Let's first start with the updates that have been made to the engine. We've still got our lovely V8 in here, but it's been updated in a number of ways to match the updates that were found in the BMW XM. So it's still our trusty 4.4 litre V8. Those updates are basically a cross-bank exhaust manifold for better thermal management. We've got a reinforced crankshaft and updated turbocharging. So like I said, everything that you saw in XM, it pushes the horsepower up to 625 brake horsepower, which is great. 750 Newton meters and a really quick 0 to 60 of 3.9 seconds. But like we said, this is a mild hybrid, the first ever BMW M mild hybrid. So it's got a 48 volt architecture in here, and then we've got an electrified 8-speed gearbox, which essentially, like you've seen in other manufacturers, you've got the hybridized element that sits within the gearbox, and this gives a boost of 200 Newton meters of torque plus a little bit of HP. And what that does, I will explain when we're actually driving the car. Now, what's cooler about that gearbox is that it's now got hydraulic mounts, which, much like engine mounts, provide a stiffer connection between the gearbox and the car, thus allowing you to transfer power more efficiently and quicker to the xDrive and our all-wheel drive system. Speaking of the xDrive, like I said, this is a car that's taking a lot from the M5. So we've got a very rear-biased xDrive system. It doesn't decouple the front axle for like rear-wheel drive mode like in the M3 and the M5, but you go into sport mode on your ESP and it will be very, very rear biased still. And what's more interesting is that they've got a new near actuator slip module that essentially works 10 times faster than a traditional one, and thus again it should help with traction, it should help with power delivery. So I'm interested to see what that feels like versus the pre-facelift. Our speed sensitive steering has been updated as well, which I'm happy about. And in fact, we've got new steering gear within this versus pre-facelift, because pre-facelift was a bit wishy-washy and numb with its steering feel, as you often find with xDrive cars. So hopefully we'll see later whether that's improved or not. Then we've got the suspension. Like I said, it's a bit more traditional here. So we've got a coil setup, but this is the adaptive M professional suspension. So we do have updated electronic dampers that apparently work faster and should help with both comfort driving and more sporty driving. Again, we will see as we go out. So that's your X6M. Bear in mind that the X5M has the exact same changes. They are mechanically identical to each other than the design changes. And one other car that I want you to keep in mind during this is the M60i, which has been updated heavily now. It's the first non-M car to feature an M V8 in a non-M car. And I wonder whether that will bring a lot of the benefits that this car has for a lesser price tag. I haven't driven that, but it's something I want you to keep in your mind while we're driving this car. Now, before we head out for that drive, I want to show you the changes inside because they are actually significantly different to your non-M cars. So let's go and check that out. So guys, looking from that angle, the structure versus pre-facelift, not that different, but there are some big changes. Mainly what I said has come over from the M3 and the M2, which is the updated system that you'll find in every new BMW with the long and slim infotainment screen from operating system 8, which is actually great, but actually it's even better in the M models than in the X5 that we just reviewed, the LCI. And I want to show you that from my perspective, the driver's perspective. So let's check that out. Of course, you can see the fact that we've got reduced buttons here already. You've got this lovely new ambient lighting strip with the M logo, which looks great, particularly at night. But as for the rest of the changes, let's take a look from the driver's perspective. So guys, here's your driver's perspective of the X6M, and here's what that perspective was in the X5. And immediately you can see the system itself is skinned completely different for the M models, and not a lot of manufacturers actually do that. In our M models, the system is significantly different enough that it just feels much more tailored to BMW M. It's little things like having the classic M1 to show your tyre pressure values, to have the M logos within your boost pressure and your engine temperature here. And then of course BMW's live view of the vehicle has always been so good, showing the actual spec of your car, etc. But we lost out on this widget view in the X5 in the standard car, which I really missed because I think it's a fantastic bit in my M2. So even that part of the main system is more M, which I really like. But there's things that are more important than that in terms of the M experience within this car. First of all, we have the steering wheel, which have got the lovely new carbon shift paddles from the M2 and the M3 with the nice textured back and the carbon inlay. And you can see you've got that lovely red colour for the minus and the plus within it. It all looks really nice, ties in nicely. You've got your M1 and your M2 buttons as well. The steering wheel is now, it's a bit old, but it's still good. It's still a good ergonomic steering wheel. And then the more important part is here, where you have your M drive unit still. It's a really good one because you can access all the important things to do with the M side of the car right here in front of you. You've still got a nice gear selecting lever here where you can knock it into manual mode and then sequentially shift up and down, which is great. A lot of manufacturers preferring to put gear sticks up here, like Mercedes and Porsche. It's nice to see M maintaining a stick where I think it should be. I'm sure you guys agree as well. Now the other thing here that we have from M3 and M4 is the M mode. So we tap the M mode button here and it goes into different displays that you can have on your front driver screen here. So if we go into sport, which actually we need to turn the car on for, it changes the display into a much more sporty display. I'll show you that change again. So if we go from M mode road, which gives you a much more traditional looking screen, and then we go back into sport and you see it changes into kind of a more M setup one. And that again, it comes out of the M3, comes out of the M4, and all of this configurable. You can decide what content you want to have within here, whether it's a view of the car, you've got maps, you've got your M setup menu itself, engine temperature, tyre readouts, and in fact sports displays, even G meter. So there's a lot in here to kind of customize it and make it your own, even within the sports setting. So that's nice. You have all of the updated M screens, the UI, the steering wheel, the driving unit, etc., as you'd find in your absolute up-to-date other BMW M cars as well, which is great. You're not getting like a hand-me-down because this is just an LCI. We also have tons of carbon fiber within here. Loads of use of it, and it's nice to see that because a lot of manufacturers, again, kind of skimping on the use of carbon fiber, leaving less places to put trim elements. Yes, I'm looking at you, Mercedes, you do that a lot, whereas this M car, for the money that you're spending on it, has got a good amount of carbon fiber and a really nice finish. The seats are fantastic, the sports seats, and they in fact come with a massaging function, which I've been using a lot, and you do get lots of different options in here. And this stuff is important for a car that costs this much, and it needs to be a good daily car as well. M setup menu is great. Here you can configure the car as you like it. Now, one thing that I want to give you guys a tip, and this is on all new M cars, if you like exhaust sounds, and you know at RBR we're all about exhaust on, the exhaust always being on, I have a tip for you, okay? Because you see this button here, unlike say AMG or other cars, it's actually useless. You tap that and it does absolutely nothing for the exhaust of the car, at least not a properly discernible difference. So what I do is I make use of M1 mode to actually control the flaps properly, and the way I do that, I change it to these settings. If I press M1, with the engine in sport, the steering's up to you, but you can hear, I'm sure you guys can hear an audible difference when I did that compared to going into comfort. Suddenly the valves open up and it's a very obvious change. So now this has become my exhaust button instead, because this thing does nothing. So if you really care about exhaust, that's what I would do. Set up M1 to really open your flaps up properly. The rest remains fairly comfortable, and look, you're not going for miles per gallon in this thing, are you? But at least now it sounds commensurately exciting. In fact, let me show you what the V8 sounds like from the outside. So nice sounding V8. Let's see what it sounds like on the road, and let's see how this more traditional setup in a super SUV translates versus the more clever stuff that we've seen other manufacturers do recently. So guys, X6M competition. First impressions when you drive this as an M guy is that everything feels really familiar. The steering, the suspension, the kind of granular feel coming through the steering wheel of the road surface. Just the way the car conducts itself on the road, you can tell that it's really from that same team, that same thought process. So you feel at home immediately if those newer cars particularly are familiar to you, which is nice. And I would include our previous Gen M5 within that category as well. The next thing you feel is how firm it is. That it's not just granularity, it is genuinely reminiscent of M5 competition, which, though never uncomfortable, would have that element of crashiness within them, I think. And it wouldn't jar you, but we'll talk more about that. First things first, this is meant to be an emotive car, and it is. The sound is nice, it's a nice V8 rumble. There's not a lot of pops and bangs or anything, there's some burbles, etc. It doesn't quite hit crescendo, but I think it's enough, and it certainly sounds powerful when you get the settings right. I like it. I like to hear the V8 rumble. I've gotten over pops and bangs now. I don't look for them in new cars. What I look for is a strong, deep rumble, and I think this car has enough of that. So despite this being a mild hybrid, V8 still sounds really quite nice. And this is our UK version, so same as EU in terms of exhaust. Now what's more interesting for me on the engine is the fact that this is now a mild hybrid. Now, a lot of people will tell you, oh, you don't really notice the difference. But when you drive enough of these cars and you drive enough non-mild hybrid combustion cars versus the ones with that little hybrid assistance, you always see an immediate difference. When you're setting off initially, when you're first applying pressure to your accelerator pedal, that is when you find that there's even less lag because you have that mild hybrid element to give you the initial horsepower boost, that 200 Newton meters of torque. And it's always in that initial touch where sometimes a combustion engine, even the best combustion engines, lag a little. This makes the V8 feel ultra responsive. But it kind of sits in the background and it doesn't interfere in any of the M side of the character of this car. It's just an improvement over what the car used to be. In terms of horsepower and speed, you're really not going to tell a difference. Not at least when you're normally accelerating, say 30 to 70, etc. It feels very, very similar, identical pretty much to your pre-LCI. But what we will actually do in terms of speed, let's check the launch, because we've made changes to the near actuator on the limited slip differential. We've made the gearbox now with hydraulic mounts so that it's firmer connection, so it should make a difference. Let's see what the launch is like in this LCI. So BMW says 3.9 seconds. Let's see what we get in reality with our race box. All active. Clean launch. Oh wow, that's quick. 3.44 seconds to 60. That is very, very impressive. I mean, that is a hugely, hugely impressive time for a car of this size and weight. 2.4 seconds. We are a shade behind the brand new Panamera Turbo E, which did 3.1 seconds, and that is, yes, a heavy super saloon, but one with a crazy new suspension system, and it's a low slung Porsche, etc. This is quick, okay? 3.4, that's good. And remember, we haven't got the horsepower on offer from a rival like Lamborghini's Urus, for example, or indeed even as much as you find in XM label red. So this is fighting its corner really well. It's a quick car. Now, we really need to get onto handling. For that, we're going to put the car into our M mode of sport, put M2 settings on, which you can see here, everything is Sport Plus, etc. Now, what I really liked from the go was the steering, which is definitely an improvement. It feels very pointy. It's not perfect in terms of feedback, but it is much improved, I think, over the pre-LCI. Like, I have more confidence knowing how much the wheels are turning, what that front end is doing, versus what I found driving the pre-LCI in Arizona. but the handling just generally seems that much better. And of course, we've had so many changes. The electronic dampers are now acting that much faster for sportiness. We've got those extra struts, etc. We've got even the gearbox mounting. So many things done here that would of course have a positive effect on the handling. None I feel more so, I think, than the steering, which is just a lot more pleasant and predictable now. Of course, those limits of understeer do come to big car, to heavy car, but I'm less bothered by it because everything else is working as I expect an M car to, and really it does in a lot of ways feel like an M5 comp on stilts. I mean, you can really pile on some speed and make some directional changes with this thing. And I genuinely find it really enjoyable to drive fast, even though, I mean, it's quite a heavy car, isn't it? It's like the same weight as the plug-in hybrid version of the Cayenne Turbo, which is crazy because that car has a big old battery in it and it's got electric range and everything. But putting that to the side for the second, this feels like an old school car. And I think a lot of that is down to the suspension and the fact that this is just a mild hybrid with a pure combustion setup. I like it. I like it. It feels like a big M5, and that's kind of, I think, where this car needs to sit, and it does sit. In terms of comfort, it does crash around this, okay? It really does. Like I said, it feels, I think, less comfortable than the M3. I mean, ouch, you saw that. That was uncomfortable. That's obviously in Sport Plus. If we dialed it down back into comfort, it's okay. You're aware that you are in a sports SUV. My passengers haven't been bothered with it, but my passengers are used to all manner of AMG and fast cars. But despite that, they've been okay, and I've been okay. It's not really stood out. I think modern dampers, particularly the updated ones in this, they react so fast that they negate a lot of that horrible crashiness that we used to have in a car like this. And I disagree with a lot of reviewers who pan this car for that element. I would be happy to drive this daily, and I have been. I think it's a nice V8 SUV to drive around. It doesn't have anywhere near the change of character that you'd find in something like Cayenne or some of the other higher end super SUVs that can genuinely go from really comfortable SUV to crazy sports car. That's not what this is doing. Instead, it's a consistent kind of level of, I am an SUV M5, and I'm not ashamed to admit it. I'm okay with that. Yeah, it's nice that it's unapologetic in that way. Now, my issue with this car is my issue with all brand new cars, and that's the price. And I know you're probably screaming down the screen at me at the moment, but you know, that's around about what that Panamera Turbo costs, which is the same level of horsepower of this car. You look at AMG's derivatives are more expensive in the AMG GLE 63S fully loaded version, which is the equivalent of this. Let's not even get started on Uruses and Purosangues and DBX 707s, which are sky high. This is the market we're in, so price is becoming a less and less relevant thing for me to moan about, sadly. If we're talking performance, you know, this is a really capable performance car. I would be happy to daily around. It feels home for an M driver like you and me, that you come out of your M2 and your M3, and this feels like the big brother of those cars. And because I love those cars, I'm also endeared towards this. Of course, if you want the more practical version, go for the X5, but there is the argument, is the M60i doing a lot of what this is doing? I can't answer that because I haven't driven the M60i, but it's something to keep in mind. Go and test that as well. It might be a good option. So guys, I hope you've enjoyed this big red X6M competition today on RBR. If you have and you found it useful, please do like, share the video and the channel with your friends. As always, it's massively appreciated. I'll see you guys next time.